Hey, this is Trav here, and just a quick reminder that this podcast relies on the kindness of my Patreons, and I would like to thank the following people: Bill, Brendan, Grant, Lisa, Mog, Dan, and Paula. Your constant monthly donation really helps out, and if you can spare $1, the link to my Patreon is in the description. Anyway, thanks for listening. Here's the show. Hey, welcome to episode 165 of Tales from the Mindboat, the slow-moving seaside boat ride inside the never regions of my mind. This is Trav Nash speaking, and thank you very much for listening to this episode. I really do appreciate it. And today's show is all about a small slice, a moment in my life that starts laying on the carpet, looking up at the ceiling, and whatever happens next. So it's a good show, and all you need to do is sit back, relax, think about the coming winter months as we set sail. The ceiling fan continued to whirl around me while I lay there flat on my back on the carpet. The world seemed quiet and peaceful, if only for a moment. The only audible sound was the low hum of the motor that was making the fan blade spin round in the air that it was cutting through. A drone sound as intoxicating as any children's lullaby, and I would have been quite happy to continue to lay there on the carpet that is permanently marked by the ears of feet that has walked over it, and all those hairballs that were waiting for me in the morning to find, remove, and erase all evidence that they ever existed. My stomach wheezed and groaned in protest to all this exercise I was putting it through. Its message was loud and clear, that I shouldn't try to exercise anymore. I just completed 30 sit-ups and 50 stomach crunches, and now my heart was pushed to its very limit and couldn't maintain supply and demand. For now I just lay there with my arms out, looking at the fan, as it slowly turned anti-clockwise and eventually began to blur, and the cream-coloured ceiling and ceiling fan soon became hard to identify one from the other. I began to feel lightheaded, and the sensation of sinking into the carpet made me feel like all the laws of physics and gravity no longer applied to me. I began to close my eyes, as if I could reset everything like my mind was a phone or a computer that was still using Windows 95. Soon everything was just a shadow of grey with streaks of coloured light that flew past my eyelids. It was then I began to really tightly shut my eyes. Everything had to be locked down for it to all go back to normal again. I squinted so hard that my eyelids must have almost folded in on themselves, and soon all that grey began to brighten. It was no longer dark, but some kind of artificial light was coming through no matter how tightly I was trying to block all the light out. The light began to change colour from blinding white light to yellow to pink and finally to red. Bright red with a hex value of FF. Where this light was coming from, I had no idea, and it began to frighten me. I wondered if all the extra blood my heart was pumping through my head had sprung a leak somewhere in my brain, and now I was being flooded in my own warm blood. But blood doesn't have this kind of colour. This was so bright and vivid and illuminated a secret world that was just between my iris of my eye and the back of my eyelid. I opened my eyes wide again, and the bright red was still there, like transparent cellophane over my vision. The room was now painted in red, and then slowly all that red faded and the world returned to its original dull colours again, illuminated only by the kitchen light and that old desk lamp in one corner. The fan still spun above me, and I was still laying on the floor. Only now my cat BB was stretched out next to me, his paws and legs extended as far as they can go, and then he pulled them back into himself. His tiny front legs curved into his chest, like he was giving himself a hug, and then turned himself over to face me to show me just how cute he really was. I think he thought we were playing some game, or this is just what people do, so he thought he would do it as well. I turned my head to the side and made contact with his, and he raised his tiny nose up to sniff my hair, and when he got all the information he could, he then would turn back, and we both faced the ceiling and watched in wonder as the fan whirled around. That whirling sound tapped into some kind of primal percussion that was playing in time with my heartbeat. I could hear the sound of Tusks by Fleetwood Mac in my head begin to play, and I could remember the first time being out drinking with some friends at a local bar, and the music video was playing. The video shows a stadium where a marching band that is dressed like Roman soldiers play their brass instruments along with the drums that drill into your ear and make sure your feet and arms tap along regardless if you want them to or not. When we saw Stevie Nicks twirling a baton around, we thought this was the funniest thing in the whole world, and I will always associate that song with that night. I can't recall what else played on that TV. Maybe it was the only thing that played. It was just that film clip on repeat, and it seemed to go on forever, and much longer than the song actually does. It is strange how one song, and the first time you hear it, becomes a marker in the timeline of your life. Where is that bar and those friends now? I have no idea. More than likely evaporated in the stretching of time. Everyone has grown up now, moved on, and has families and new friends of their own. I wondered if I was the only one in the world right now, lying on the floor of an empty apartment, watching a ceiling fan with his cat. Surely there was someone out there who is doing the same thing. It's more than possible, as there are so many of us alive right now. Surely someone out there, right now, is taking a little time out from whatever's going on in their lives, and just appreciating those small moments of silence while they watch the blade spin with a soft low drone. A ringing in my ear that has been there all day has become much louder and harder to ignore, a phantom pitch with no identifiable point of origin. In the same way, I could see perfect shades of red behind my eyelids and had no idea where it was coming from. I still felt weightless. My heart was rapidly pumping within my chest, but was slowly turning down its output now and returning to a steady pace again. I started to breathe in slowly and exhale until there was nothing left inside my body, and I wanted it all gone and savor the feeling of truly feeling empty until I drew in a deep breath again and repeated this process for more than 10 minutes or so. Each time I breathed in and breathed out, I thought of sand slipping through a plastic egg timer my mother had when she was making dinner, and how I just wanted to watch the white sand pass through the tiny hole, and the way it made those perfectly shaped mounds of white as the final grains fell through the gap. I would impatiently want to keep turning it over and over again, and it drove my mother insane. There was something about holding something in space and letting gravity bring it back down, and watching it gracefully land within the confines of the hourglass shape. Each time the white mounds of sand was a little different, and it fascinated me at how unpredictable it really was, even when it was designed to be repeated over and over again. My auntie on Christmas got one of these moving sand art frames. This was something in the late 80s that was pretty common, and seemed at one point everyone had one, and then they just as quickly as they came, they went out of vogue, and I've never really seen anything like it again. It was basically a wooden frame with two thin pieces of glass that held bottom and top layer of sand. One part was black and the bottom part was white, and if you shook it up or turned it over on its side, the sand would jumble together and then slowly begin to drip down from the top and create these stunning looking dark landscapes like they were painted in charcoal. This made my mum's egg timer look like a stick figure drawing next to a Picasso, and I just wanted to keep turning it over and over again to see what new image would form. It never looked the same with every new shuffle of the sand, and it was all I could focus on. I remembered my mother almost having a stroke as I held it up and turned it over, assuming that I would break it as soon as I touched it. But I just wanted to have control over the new form that was about to take shape. Years later, the moving sand frame was put in a cupboard. My uncle didn't want anyone to touch it anymore, because to him he created that perfect image and he never wanted it altered. And I was saddened by this fact. There were still so many possibilities that would never be known by anyone anymore. Now the sands were set and lay dormant, never to be moved again. The final image looked like a black and white photo of some faraway mountains overlooking a vast desert and stretched out for eternity. It was almost like a Dali painting without the weird obscure sculpture or the constant portrait of his wife Gala in the middle. I guess nobody really wants anything to change. Even if there is an option to receive a fresh new image and perspective, the possibilities can be overwhelming. And sometimes we just want to settle on something we like and don't want to roll the dice again unless we run out of luck this time. The ringing in my ears became less and less noticeable. My heart had returned back to a rhythm that I could no longer feel, reverberating through my body. I had no idea how long I was laying there for. When I turned on my side, I noticed that BB the cat was gone, now sitting on the computer chair above me, looking down with a face of curiosity and concern. His feet were all tucked tightly underneath him and looked like a white fluffy dodgem car with his tail permanently in the air, until I began to stand up again, and he lowered his tail and wrapped it in front of him as he wondered what I was going to do next. When I stood up again, it was like I had to learn to walk again. I'd become unsteady like a video you can watch of a baby giraffe learning to walk. I fell sideways and scraped the top part of the inside of my arm against the bookshelf, leaving a dark bruise, and as the pain ran up my arm to my brain, snapped my body into an upright position. When I found my balance again, I rubbed the sore arm as if I could rub the pain off. In my mind, it was a matter of just brushing off cat hair off a jacket, and then I started to think how many stupid things we do in a day that achieve nothing, but in our minds they seem to do a lot of good. Seeing that I was now standing again, and right on the piece of the floor where the carpet ends and the wooden floorboards to the kitchen begin, my oldest cat Belle sauntered out like the queen she thinks she is. She walked with the kind of confidence that a fashion model has, that doesn't want you to look at them, but needs you to look at them at the same time. When she got close enough for maximum impact, she began to meow and whine in her patented high-pitched tone that she has perfected over all these years of supreme annoyance. She knows that it's a sound that nobody can ignore, and I can feel the ringing in my ear gain volume again as it tried to match the frequency, and I wondered if there was any correlation between the two sounds. More than likely, I'm slowly going deaf because of this constant whinging, and I guess that's fine with me. I never really want to hear that sound ever again. I finally gave in and was steady enough to stand and move at the same time. So I picked up her tube of biscuits, and instantly she squealed with delight and went running to her food bowl on the other side of the room. I had to feed BB first, who adores Belle so much she's always watching what she's gonna do next. In the same way, I guess I used to be fascinated with watching coloured sand float down and create pictures. I dropped a few biscuits in his bowl and had to push it under his face so he could stop watching Belle for a second and eat something before she does. Belle, on the other hand, considered I was taking too long and came running over to tell me I'm not moving fast enough as we walked together across the room, and she made a happy chirping sound in anticipation of her evening snack. When I got to her bowl, which was placed at the bottom of a ravaged cat tree, I began to place a single biscuit on each level and try to hide them in places so she would have to seek them out. It was like a new daily Easter egg hunt for cats that I had been doing each day to try and get her to chew her food one at a time, instead of just gulping down a bowl full of biscuits in one gulp like a pelican. She stood up and looked over each platform, using her tiny nose to sniff out where the rest of the biscuits were, and I sat down on the couch and enjoyed these quiet moments where she's not whinging. I only ever really get breaks when she's already eating or fast asleep, and luckily that's more than 87% of the day. I took this time to close my eyes tightly to see if I can still see that red, and there it was, like it's always been there, and maybe I just never really noticed. I thought for a second I was having some kind of heart attack and began sniffing wildly like a rabbit to see if I could smell burnt toast, but all I could smell was this musty smell of cat biscuits and lavender incense that had finished burning a few hours ago. I opened my eyes again and let the colours soak back into the room, and began to wonder if this has always been a thing and maybe I'm overthinking it. or if this is a new issue of my ever-growing list of complaints and problems that I need to send off to the manufacturer of whoever built me and made me so unreliable and prone to breaking down. The fan began to rock slightly from the ceiling, and the crack just above the fixture seemed to get a little bigger. I looked up beyond the blades that were struggling to find their rhythm again, and wondered when the ceiling fan will eventually give up and come crashing down, and knowing my luck, it would probably happen right when I'm lying underneath the fan, out of breath and recovering from trying to accomplish a few sit-ups. The fan soon became steady again, and eventually was exactly as it was before, but even then it felt like this was just a temporary state of being. The next thing I know, a shelf dropped in the bathroom, and the crashing of toothbrushes and makeup cases fell into the sink. As soon as it happened, the sound was so loud and unexpected that both cats ran and disappeared in their favourite hiding spots. BB under the rug of the bed, and Belle under my desk behind the computer tower. This seemed to happen so often that my partner and I would brush it off as the ghost in the bathroom again. I walked in to investigate and saw one of the shelves we got from the $2 shop had lost its grip on the cold bathroom tile, and I had to put some water on the suction cups and attach the plastic shelf again, and then return all the objects that were now jumbled in the sink back on the shelf. Once I had put everything back, I looked up and noticed myself in the mirror, something I really don't do and go out of my way not to make eye contact. I'm designed naturally to look away when I'm confronted with myself. But now here I was, looking back at a new version, all grey-haired and wearing glasses, a far cry from whatever I was a lifetime ago, almost unrecognizable to me. Somehow I've made it through, even with everything that life thrown at me, but I'm still here, still standing, looking back at myself in a dimly lit, cramped bathroom. There was something strange with looking directly back at yourself. When you spend so long in your own head and seeing everything from the inside out, when your true aging self is reflected back, it's something that takes a while to process. It seems so unreal that I find myself raising my arms in hope that it really isn't myself being reflected, but some strange imposter. And as odd as it sounds, I would have rathered that. For what is before me isn't what I am familiar with. None of this is. It's all changing and spinning and will go on, with or without my knowing or even existing. There is only the here and now, and this is the only thing that is here, in the now. And slowly these truths came into focus as reality, and I strangely found myself okay with this. I closed my eyes tightly, and there was no longer any red, just something bright just outside of my closed eyes. When I opened them again, it was still there in front of me, still me, just slightly different, older and tired, but still here. I felt the need to splash water on my face, and the cold water cooled down my flushed cheeks, and I walked back into the living room, feeling cold, and wondered why the fan was even on in the first place. I opened the wardrobe where the fan dial is hidden, and turned it off, and the blade span around once more and came to a halt, and will more than likely stay this way, collecting dust until the spring returns. I stood in that bathroom doorway and watched the fan stop, and Belle the cat came out from her hiding spot and sat in front of me and opened her big mouth and let out a complaint of not being fed in the past few minutes. I ignored her and sat down on the couch. I looked at my arm that was already turning dark grey, and I began rubbing it again, and then stretched it out to try and break this bad habit in front of me, and then pulled it back in, and just sat there in the stillness. In that precise moment, I felt at ease and prepared myself for the next moment, and how unpredictable every moment from there on is going to be. So that's it for another week. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. It really does mean a lot to me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, leaving a 5-star review on the very device you're using would really help. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, whatever you cool kids are using these days to get this into your ear, letting other people know, I'd really appreciate it. And just telling someone verbally, using good old-fashioned word of mouth, is probably the best way to get it out there to as many people as possible. Cool people who are just as like-minded as yourself. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Facebook. Doing so lets me know that you support and like what I'm doing here. You can follow me on Twitter at Nashtopia, or you can follow me on Instagram as my kind of art diary at Trav Nash Draws Stuff. Theme music for this podcast is composed by Tim Witt. You can listen to his music right now on SoundCloud just by searching for Tim Witt Sounds. You can also pick up his albums and pay whatever you feel is appropriate on Bandcamp right now, and I highly recommend that you do that. If you like this theme song, it's 100 times better his actual albums. This episode was written, read, produced and edited by me, Trav Nash, the guy who's talking. And thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you have a good week. I don't really have anything new to say, but I hope you're doing well and you look after yourself. I want you to stay safe until next Monday when a new episode drops. Be good, be cool. Peace.